Hello, hello, hello. This is Jeff with Fluent American checking in. Okay, and again, today we're going to be focusing on IELTS, specifically for task one for the academic test. One of the biggest things for the academic test is that for these task ones, you need to include an overview statement where basically you take a look at the prompt, you look at or not the prompt, but the graphic, the chart, the diagram, the map, whatever is in your task one, and you try to identify basically the major trends that you see. So when we say major trends, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about things like, depending on the chart, the numbers that are the biggest or versus the smallest or changes that you see. So, for instance, if you see an upward trend or a downward trend, these are things you want to note. If you're talking about, like, say, a before and after picture, you want to try to identify the areas that had the greatest change versus areas that had little change or no change at all. For if you get a process diagram or like a cycle where it says first this happens, then this, I normally suggest for those situations for your overview, you want to kind of mention the first step, the last step, and basically just say, like, hey, in order for this to happen, there are four, five, six different stages, including the first one and the last one. Okay. And maybe you can even mention one in the middle as well. Okay. But we're going to take a look at a couple of examples. I've posted the document in the chat box. So feel free to take a look at that. I also encourage you to take a look at our Facebook group. Okay, so if you're looking for some regular IELTS practice, I think you'll really enjoy the group. I'll post a link to that in the chat box as well. Okay, and of course, you can access this document if you're not watching us live but seeing the recording. You can also access the document and see everything there. I won't take this down. Okay. Here is our Facebook group, which I'll put again in the chat box. And now let's take a look at our document in the Google Doc. Okay, so I have three different pictures for us. One of them is a bar graph, second one is a table, and then the third one is a line chart. Okay, and again, we're just going to be writing overviews. We're not focused on actually describing the data. Okay, if you're looking for that type of information, check out our other videos. What I would suggest, I know a lot of students like to write rephrases for their task ones. I would suggest not starting with a rephrase. I would instead suggest starting with an overview. A rephrase is not necessary to getting a good score. In fact, it can hurt your score if you do it poorly. So I suggest normally starting with your overview statement. Okay. So our very first chart that we can see. So we have basically we have a mixed chart. So we have a bar graph, two bar graphs that we need to be looking at. Computer ownership, 2002 to 2010, and then computer ownership based on education level. So let's just kind of talk a little bit about what we see in these charts. As I talk through this, if you have questions, just post them in the chat box and I'll take a look and try to answer. Okay. So our first one, computer ownership 2002 to 2010. What's the general trend that we see? Well, we generally see that the numbers are going up. It starts in 2002 at about, maybe that's like 56%. And then by 2010, it gets to about 76, 77%. Okay. So about a 20% increase. Um, no year that I see is lower than the previous year. So 2004 is bigger than 2002, 2006 than 2004, 2008 is bigger than 2006, and 2010 is bigger than 2008. Okay, so that's something that we'll want to consider when we're writing our overview. Since we have two charts here, I strongly suggest in your overview mentioning both. You can't just refer to one chart. You need to mention both charts when you're preparing your overview. Okay, it's just something to keep in mind. So our second chart is about education level. What do we notice here? Actually, very similar trends. Okay, so I see 2002 to 2010. 2002, well, I'm misreading this chart, excuse me. So we're seeing that the lower your educational level, the less likely you're going to own a computer. And there's no year that breaks that trend. So, for instance, if you have no high school diploma, you have the lowest percent of owning a computer. And then if you have a postgraduate degree, then you're the most likely to have a computer. Okay. So in terms of data, this overview is not doing a whole lot of um, I wouldn't it's not doing a whole lot of tricky things. All the numbers are climbing. Okay, so that should make overview slightly easier to write. Okay. So a fine way to start an overview, just be starting off with like overall. So overall, from 2002 to 2010, okay, mentioning our full date range. Okay. Um, it can be seen computer ownership steadily grew from year to year. Since we have two charts, I think it's okay to add two sentences for your overview. You don't want your overviews to be too long, and that can be a problem. Okay, if your overview is too long, that can lower your score. So you're generally looking for about 1 to 2 sentences for your length. Okay, 1 to 2 sentences is fine. Um, Especially if you have two charts, I think 2 sentences is fine. Additionally, it appears that as people become more educated, they are also more likely to own computers. Okay. And I think for your in terms of overview, that's done. We're done that first one. Okay, you're just doing two basic things. First thing is saying that, hey, look, from year to year, more and more people are owning computers. Second one is saying, hey, no matter what the year is, 2002 or 2010, every year people are more and more likely. I mean, every education category, people are more and more likely to own computers. Okay. So I think in terms of overview, I think this one would be fine. A quick note about overviews is that there's more than one way to write an overview. There are other topics that maybe you think would be appropriate to discuss, and that's perfectly fine. Okay. There's more than one possible answer to these. These are just ones that I'm suggesting for what I'm seeing. Okay. I'm going to move on to our second chart. It's on the second page. Here we have a table talking about school attendance, secondary school. Okay. We have different types of schools: specialist, grammar, voluntary, controlled, and community schools. I'm not entirely sure what all of these are, but again, it doesn't really matter. The data here is doing a lot more movement. Okay, so we have specialist schools that every time period it goes down a little bit. Then we have grammar schools that has a sharper decreases. Then we have voluntary controlled schools, which also have decreases, even sharper decreases. And then community schools is doing the opposite. So it's going up. Okay. So for our overview here, let's just make sure that we're mentioning all these things. So based on the chart, it can be said that attendance at specialist schools, since we're repeating schools, I could just say specialist, comma, grammar, comma, and voluntary controlled schools decreased from 2000 to 2009. Might add in the decrease like without interruption to show that every year for each of these categories, the numbers fell. Okay, so that's why I'm adding that part about without interruption, is saying that, hey, even in 2005, these numbers were still falling. And then we can add a note about community schools. Community schools, however, bucked the trend and increased every year. Maybe like every selected year. I don't want to say every year because I don't have enough data to say like 2001, 2002, 2003. So instead, I'm saying every selected year to make it clear that, hey, 2000, 2005, 2009. Okay. Another word you could use besides selected could be reported. It's like every reported year there was this situation. Okay. So again, that would be my suggestion for an overview for that second chart. Okay, and then again, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the box. Our last one, so consumption of fast food by Australian teenagers. So here again, we have our line graph. On the left, we have the frequency, and then in the bottom, we have the years. Okay, let's kind of just talk about what we're seeing in the chart. So I'm seeing that hamburgers had a real sharp increase from 75 until about 85, and then it kind of slowed down and started to plateau, especially between 95 and 2000. Okay. So steady, so basically increasing. We see kind of a similar trend with pizza. Pizza also had a pretty sharp rise, and then plateaued around 95. Okay. Um, Last group then would be fish and chips, and that's pretty typical in an IELTS chart. One number does the opposite. So they have a sharp fall, then a slight rise, and then another fall. Okay. So let's start off with our overview. So again, I don't want to start with I want to try to give you some ideas of ways to start without using overall. So another way we could start this. I mean, you don't even need to say. You could just say, so while fish and chips had a more maybe like erratic trajectory, fall, a rise, and a heavy fall. And maybe like consumption. Both pizza and hamburgers experienced sharp rises and a plateau starting around or like in a plateau, just to make sure we're talking about the plateau, not everything else. In the plateau, which started around, here do we say it? Actually, this is a little bit before 95. Let's say that was that like 93, right around 93. If the first dash is 1975, the second dash is 1980, third one's 1985, fourth one's 1990, fifth one is 1995, the sixth one is 2000. So that means that this would be starting around 1993. Okay. So I think in terms of this chart, I think this could work. So while fish and chips had a more erratic trajectory with a fall, a rise, and a heavier fall in consumption, both pizza and hamburgers experienced sharp rises and a plateau, which started around 1993. Okay. And I think in terms of overviews, I think this would work fine for this task one for the overview. All right, so again, these are just three quick examples of task one overviews. If you guys have questions about these or you're writing your own overview and just want someone to take a quick look, feel free to post them in the comments. I'll be happy to take a peek and see if there's anything I can suggest. Beyond that, happy preparing for IELTS. Check out our Facebook group and feel free to join, as well as our other IELTS essay topics and essays. My name's Jeff. Thank you guys for your time. We'll see you in a future essay, future video. Take care.